This is cybersecurity in large law firms. My name is Scott Arnaud. We have a lot to cover, so let's jump right in. Lawyers make excellent targets for data theft. It's an open secret that law firms are targeted constantly. Attackers often see law firms as a backdoor to strike at the firm's clients. Among criminal hackers, law firms are typically viewed as soft targets with valuable information. Nearly every major firm has experienced a breach at some point, many more than once. In fact, one of the largest data breaches in history took place at a law firm in April 2016. That was Mossack Fonseca, and that breach was better known to the public as the Panama Papers. But the threats go well beyond data breaches. Ransomware, business email compromise scams, distributed denial of service attacks, and others pose a problem. According to the FBI, business email compromise, or BEC scams, have cost $43 billion in losses since 2016. Attacks have increased by 65% between July 2019 and December of 2021. And in 2021, data breaches arising from ransomware increased as much as they had in the preceding 5 years combined. That's according to the Verizon Enterprise 2022 Data Breach Investigations Report, which is well regarded in industry. These numbers actually are very low, since many victims don't report the crimes. According to the FBI, only 10 to 12% of cyber crimes are actually reported. Now, large law firms typically do have the advantage of resources, including dedicated security personnel and budgets, but that size also makes larger firms more prominent targets. Today we'll talk about pertinent tech basics, risk management fundamentals, network security, and incident response. Data is broken into three general categories: active, archival, and latent. Active data is what you see in front of you when you're using a computer, your phone, whatever it is. It's the stuff you can access right away. It's the stuff you can easily retrieve. Archival data is stuff that's been put away. It's effectively the same data but put into deeper storage. You might think of it like papers put off in a warehouse. You can get to it, but it's not right there. So this might be something like a backup that's off somewhere else. Latent data is a little more interesting. That's stuff that people think they've deleted from a system that's still lurking around somewhere. As you can imagine, forensic investigators are pretty fond of that. Now, data itself, all data, is reduced to binary code. You've seen this. It's ones and zeros, often disappearing into the horizon. And because all data is reduced to this information, this allows various devices to share information because effectively they're all using the same type of data. Now, every individual 1 or 0 is called a bit. The smallest amount that's actually readable is 8 of them together, which is a byte, B-Y-T-E. That's pretty small. Depending on the program, it might be a number, a letter, maybe a small word. It's not a lot. But as they gather up, they get bigger, you can have more and more information. You've heard of the terminology. 1,021 bytes is called a kilobyte. 1,021 of those is a megabyte, then a gigabyte, terabyte, and so on. And as you have more of them, they each cover more information. And it depends a bit on what you're using it for. Like a high-def movie will take up more space than a standard definition movie, that type of thing. But as a general benchmark, if you're talking about just text, a gigabyte is about 75,000 pages of data. So it's a fair amount. And of course, think about how many gigabytes you see in even a stick drive sitting in your pocket, and it adds up pretty quickly. So the actual storage is done in three basic fashions. There's magnetic, optical, and flash, also known as solid-state or SSD storage. Examples of this: magnetic, you might see something like older hard drives, and they're literally stacked like pancakes. It's these silvery disks. They look a little bit like compact disks, and there'll be a little spindle arm that reads the data. It's actually stored as changes in magnetic polarity, so positives and negatives will correspond to the ones and zeros. CDs and DVDs use optical drives, and that's basically using a laser to read, but instead of the magnetic switches, it's little, very, very small depressions in the disk, which it reads to correspond to the data. USB drives, smartphones, and some newer hard drives will use the SSDs, which are done in a non-moving fashion using little switches inside them. One thing that's interesting about that type of storage is that because they have to preserve the drive, if something is saved multiple times, it's saved in multiple places, which of course can create an interesting thing should someone be looking into that drive later for data. Now, that's storage. A concept related to that is storage versus memory. You may have heard of RAM, which is random access memory. That's called volatile memory. What that means in English is that it works so long as your computer is on. So you may think of that as your working space while you're using your computer. And effectively, when you turn it off, that working space is completely cleared off. So anything you haven't saved or stored will be lost. Perhaps you may remember back in school, if you had an incident where you were working on a report and something went wrong with the computer, you lost all your work if you hadn't saved it. On a related note, what is a program, also referred to as an application or app? In a simple fashion, it's basically a set of instructions for a computer or device to follow. Related note, An algorithm is a procedure or formula using a sequence of specified steps to solve a problem. One other concept we should touch upon is protocols and ports. Protocols are effectively the languages of devices. Different protocols will cover different types of information, and the ports are the openings between different devices that allow them to communicate.